As many of you know, I am very optimistic about the Texans improving the run game this year for a variety of reasons. But then, whenever I get confident about something, the old that part of your brain that says, wait a second, let's not get ahead of ourselves here. So there's an article by DJ Bienaime. I've got a link in the description below to the full article where Tytus Howard said some pretty interesting stuff about this year compared to last year, and a lot of people chose to use that as like him taking a shot at Bobby Slowick, which it may have been, but just to see what we're talking about here. Under Caley and Popovich, Howard believes the offense fits us the best. The biggest difference is our mentality. This type of offense fits a lot of the guys that we have in the room. Being able to start the game off strong as an offensive line and being able to finish games. Also running the ball and then using the run game to open up the pass game. Yes, 100%. I'm cool with that. Not coming out getting effing negative yards on outside zone run plays, stuff that didn't really fit us. And I agree with a lot of that. I think there's a lot about last year's offense that didn't necessarily fit the Texans. But if we just watch some of the outside zone run plays from the Titans game, and this is when it was at its worst. This is when the Texans were really trying to push the outside zone run, and they were just getting walloped. So there's the part of it where Bobby Slowick was leaning into this because the Titans were bad against the outside zone run, and yet just absolutely getting destroyed in this game. You guys all remember this. Texans favored to win at home. They've been really good at home, and yet this is what we saw all day long out of the outside zone run. The problem I have a little bit with explaining it away by mentality or what have you is that when you watch these plays, there's multiple dudes just getting their butts whipped right there. 17's unblocked. You got an offensive lineman on the ground. You've got wide receivers getting beat by cornerbacks, linebackers running free. But then when you go to the inside run, stuff that they're going to major in this year, these two defensive tackles, T'Vondre Sweat on the left and Jeffrey Simmons from the right, they whipped the Texans on inside runs as well. And you look at that line of scrimmage is getting pushed back into the lap of Joe Mixon. I mean, T'Vondre Sweat basically just has to box people out. So that's where I start to pull back a little bit, in that mindset is great. I think the inside runs and duo and power and gap scheme stuff probably suits this offensive line better than an outside zone run based scheme. But I think sometimes it almost, people start saying, oh yeah, the outside zone run scheme, that's soft, that's not tough, that's physical. The 49ers have been really good at the outside zone run over the course of the last 5 years, and I can't remember the 49ers offensive line ever being characterized as soft. If you can find me an article where Trent Williams is described as soft, and it's not something where it's just the Washington Commanders trying to throw shade at him as he was forcing his way out of town, then so be it. It's got to be the change in scheme and mindset coupled with actual execution. And I am optimistic about it. I think they've shown a lot of that. DJ had some good stats in here about that Titans game as well. If you want to swing it back towards throwing shade at Bobby Slowick, this was, let's see, one example was against the Titans in Week 12 when Slowick ran outside zone because Tennessee allowed 4.9 yards per attempt through 11 weeks. But come game time, the Titans were ready, having defenders positioned in running back Joe Mixon's cutback lanes as he totaled 17 yards on 11 carries on outside zone rush attempts. Even though it wasn't working, 78% of his rushes were outside as the Texans would go on to lose 32-7. So as you guys know, a lot of my criticism about Bobby Slowick wasn't even as much on the specific play calling as the execution of the play calling. And I agree. I don't think the Texans' offensive tackles or guards were necessarily well suited to the outside zone rushing attack. It's just that it's got to be that, man, the physicality by that interior three as well versus guys like T'Vondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons, that's going to be a big test for them. And just by repetition and doing it more often, you're going to get better at it. One of the problems with trying to run inside last year versus them was it's a team that had been repping outside zone. When all of a sudden you try to manhandle guys like T'Vondre Sweat, it's not going to happen. And Shaq Mason was obviously also physically an issue on that one. This is the other the other one, Stroud was pressured on 38.6% of his dropbacks, third most in the league, which resulted in him being sacked 52 times, second most. Against the Chiefs, Stroud was sacked 8 times and pressured on 56% of his dropbacks, the second highest in an NFL playoff game since ESPN began tracking pressure rates in 2009, trailing only Tim Tebow. 63% pressure rate in 2011. My God, bring Tebow back. Give him another chance. Damn it. I'm just trying to give some clarity to the situation. I'm optimistic about the run game, but whether it's Tytus Howard himself or anybody else on that offensive line, they've got to prove that they can take what they did in the preseason and roll it on into the regular season, obviously. Which of our running backs do you think the new system is best catered to? I think that theoretically, I think the guy that will have the most upside is Dameon Pierce. I think that now, I don't want to get too technical here without video to show it, but when you're running duo, which is just when the offensive linemen are double teaming the defensive tackles and then you're waiting for a linebacker to make his move, that's the one thing I wonder a little bit about because the Texans have run a boatload of that, and Dameon has to make a read on that. And I think there's some times where when Dameon has to make a read, his vision is not the same as perhaps Nick Chubb's. So they might tailor the run selection a little bit when Dameon's in there. With Chubb, I think it fits perfectly. And Mixon, I think, is fine in any scheme. And we got a whole other bundle of issues to worry about with Joe Mixon. I'm just putting him on a shelf for four weeks or so. But Mixon or Chubb, I think you've got a real potential to see Chubb churning out at least 4 to 5 yards consistently and being way better than they were last year. So it's the potential for when Tytus talks about the negative plays, the potential for negative plays just by virtue of the play calling and what they're doing this year. You're not going to have as many free runners into the backfield and guys penetrating through gaps because you tend to just present more of a solid mass of humanity when you're running gap scheme stuff, and it's harder for guys to just penetrate as deeply. Sometimes with the outside zone, teams specifically are saying, we're just going to get upfield, and maybe sometimes we get washed, but we're just going to penetrate into the backfield, and there's more gaps and schisms in which to do that. So Brandon, I've been very up and down with my O-line run game optimism. That's where we are right now. We got a week. We got a week to just sort all this stuff out. And we just flat out won't know until we get there. I hate this. I hate this week. I hate Labor Day week. I hate everything about it. That's why I work on Labor Day. I just don't want to, I don't need this pause before the rest of the season begins. One other tidbit from the DJ Bienaime article, which again is, there's a link to it in the description below. It's a good article. And one more tidbit from DJ in there after this. The organization hopes for the progression to continue, and it also hopes that the Texans aren't just playing in playoff games, but hosting them. Let's play that divisional game at home. That's a whole different game when you're in your stadium. 100%. And I think I would add to that, as much as it's a strength for the Texans to have that pass rush working at home, that there's also an element of, man, you can't be dropping games like you did to the Titans at home. You just can't have that happen. And that comes with consistency, better pass protection, everything else. When it comes to helping out the offensive line, I think the type of play calling we've seen so far in the preseason, both in practice and in the games, lends itself well to helping out the offensive line. I think the quick game is going to be a lot more developed and a lot more automatic this year. I think Woody Marks is going to be used as a weapon early and often in the passing game. So whether the offensive line improves drastically or just a little bit, I think the play calling itself is going to make the level of difficulty a little bit different. And also, if you look at the first half of last season, man, look, I know, like, people are all over the place on how much a false start actually matters. Laramie Tunsil was at a record-breaking pace for false starts, and it's easy to diminish that and say, well, it's just 5 yards. It's taking what would be a 2nd and 6 and making it 2nd and 11. And when you've got guys with question marks as far as their pass protection goes on the interior, it makes it really, really difficult for those guys to operate. So I think it was especially hurtful to the Texans offense last year and the types of offensive linemen they had. But by keeping it in manageable down and distance, and then also by developing a pass game, a quick passing game, I think whether those guys on the inside are huge improvements or not over Shaq Mason or Kenyon Green or whatever else it might be, there's not going to be as many chances to get hurt by that if the play calling works out the way we'd like it to do. Let's see. Bubba. British Brooks, 640 yards, 8 touchdowns, 12 pancake blocks, 22 tackles, 2 fumble recovers, 1 onside coverage. I'm here for it, man. Try not to let my worry of Jared Verse ruin college football opening weekend. Yes, let's get back to college football. And I got to get my eyeballs on some of these people to start putting on my wish list for next year for the Texans. CJ and the O-line scheme is going to cook. I think they're going to be better. I'm pretty confident that they're going to be better. I just I don't want to be irrationally optimistic about predicting greatness until we see them work through whatever hiccups there are in the first 4 or 5 games, and then really Joe Mixon. I don't watch any Joe Mixon highlights, okay? I've been making a lot of cut-ups and breaking things down and everything to get ready for this first week for some previews, and it's just different. Joe Mixon was different last year, especially that Don't watch the Chargers game. Whatever you do, don't watch the Chargers game, okay? He just looks different than any running back the Texans have on the roster right now. Let's see. Bobby and his play calling was especially hurtful to our offense last year. Yeah, and I just, where I was definitely not a fan of Bobby by the end. I was trying to give him a chance. You guys probably remember at which point in the season last year I lost faith. But even like the hope of faith. I always want to be careful where you put too much of it on the offensive coordinator. But I think when we look back on this 5 years from now or so, yeah, it might become really evident that, wow, Bobby Sloak was a really bad offensive coordinator. And maybe he'll be good on into the future, but he just wasn't ready for it yet. I think Nick Caley's just more ready to be an offensive coordinator. Nick Caley is a first-time offensive coordinator. I think he has more tools in his bag than Bobby Sloak did when he got here. D'Amico is obviously he's been spending more time with the offense. I think when it comes to mindset, because I think I titled this as Mindset Enough, it's not enough, but it helps a whole lot, and especially when that mindset is also geared towards getting the fundamentals right. And that's one thing compared to last offseason that this offensive line in training camp just looks so much better with the fundamentals. I think the scheme does fit them better just physically than the outside zone scheme did. And then when you didn't last year have an offensive line coach who was actually really good at teaching the offense's chosen scheme, that's a big part of it. One thing about the offensive line, when it comes to coaching the outside zone, it's always been way more technical than people would realize. Like the outside zone scheme takes a lot of artistry. It's almost like you got to be a skilled martial artist to be able to do it well as an offensive lineman. But now, without being able to cut block nearly as much or as viciously as you could in the past because the rules changes, I think it puts that much more emphasis on the importance of proper coaching. And that's why guys like Kyle Shanahan, and I think their offensive line coach is still the old, the guy that got caught in the snorting video back a few years ago. I think it's still him, but he's an awesome offensive line coach. Strausser wasn't that way. I don't know if it was his recreational activities or lack thereof that didn't get him up to that level, but that's where we are. Going to do something about Micah Parsons a little bit later, just as a rhythm changer, and because it's so much fun, damn it. I just love to watch the Jerry spin on all of this. Thank you, everybody. Please like, subscribe, etc.